We're going to be in Genesis chapter number 37. If you want to flip there, this is where we're going to start anyway. As we talk about the journey, right? That's kind of a loaded statement for me now, more so than it was a few weeks ago. But following Jesus isn't something that automatically transforms me into this rainbow-filled unicorn that just goes through life flawlessly, right? Following Jesus is hard work. It takes grit. And part of becoming a disciple is developing some grit. It's not just something that happens without my intention. Following Jesus is quite a process. Here's kind of the foundation, what I want to say today. I don't want to end this life as someone who was a believer and not a follower. I don't want to get, when it's all said and done, to look back over my life, when I stand before God, to be someone who was a believer through my entire life, but never was a follower. And here's the reality. If I'm going to follow Jesus, if I'm going to be a disciple, He's called me to go through some things. Some floods and some pneumonias and stuff, right? Is that the will of God? Is it the purpose of God? Did He send a flood? Well, He did one time. Did He cause us to be sick? No, but here's the deal. As I'm going through life, the Bible says it rains on the just and the unjust, right? Like, being a follower of Jesus doesn't give me a free pass around life. It just gives me someone to take me through, to walk with through life. So if you're on a journey with Jesus, let me tell you something. I'm going to be the bearer of bad news this morning. If you are on a journey with Jesus, it will take you longer to get there, and it will take you on a route that you never saw coming. But that's a good thing, right? So as we think about this thing of a journey, as we think about kind of going through this process and all the delays and the detours and the stuff we've experienced, as I was preparing this before all the other stuff, while we still had carpet, I was kind of hinging everything on the story of Joseph. And so I want to go to Genesis 37. And I'm going to give you just a really, really brief excerpt from the very beginning. So if you're looking at our notes, Genesis 37 through 47 is this whole story. If you want to catch the whole thing, there's a link right there. You can read the whole thing. Wait till after the service, please. But so Genesis 37 through 47 is like the life of Joseph. And Joseph, well, let's look at it right here. Verse number 3, the Bible said, now Israel, this is Jacob, loved Joseph more than any of his sons. It's a terrible father, by the way. Because he was the son of his old age. And he made him a robe of many colors. But when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, they hated him and they could not speak peacefully to him. I don't really blame them, right? We can be real holy if we want to. I'm the favorite kid. And so I don't feel this to the level that you may. My sister, if she were here, she would like identify with this because she accuses me of being the golden child, right? Any firstborns in here? Congratulations. But Joseph wasn't even the firstborn. He was like the end. He was the caboose. He was the one where Jacob and the wife just gave up. They're like, this is the one. He's our favorite, just whatever. I told somebody this week, as you have more children, you require less and less. When the first one's born, you need all the gadgets. When the second one comes along, you need like a well-stocked diaper bag. By the third one, you need like some napkins that you found from under your seat. A crumbled up diaper that may or may not fit shoved in your back pocket. You're ready to take on life. Like find something non-toxic you can stick in their mouth. We're good. That's the third. And Joseph here is, he's coming along, and he is the favorite. But when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all of his brothers, they hated him and could not speak peacefully to him. Verse number 5 says this, now Joseph had a dream. This wasn't like Joseph had like a hope. This was God gave Joseph a dream. And when he told it to his brothers, they hated him even more. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on talking about Joseph's dream and what God called him to and what he said to his brothers and how they responded. Here's the fact. God called Joseph to be the leader of the family. Not just of the family, but to be the leader of the people of Israel. He was going to be the one that was kind of set up as a leader that would eventually like carry them through. The problem is Joseph didn't know how to handle it. Because Joseph knew that God called him to be a leader, but he didn't understand anything about serving. Because everything had always been handed to him. Parents, let me talk to us for just a second. Because when we create an atmosphere where you learn how to lead, but you never learn how to serve, you set people up for failure. Right? I set my kids up for failure when I don't teach them how to work for what... Let me move on. I'm not going to stay there all day long. Some of y'all are already mad at me. And so Joseph is called to be a leader, but you can't lead until you learn how to serve. In the kingdom, you cannot lead until you learn how to serve. If you look in Jesus' last days, right before he's crucified, the Bible said he gets up from the dinner table, ties a towel around his waist, and gets down and begins to wash his disciples' feet. And they're like, Jesus, what are you doing? It's not your job to wash our feet. He said, now you need to understand something. Until you learn how to serve, you'll never understand how to lead. And so Joseph understands that he's called to be a leader, but he doesn't understand that he's called to be a servant. And so there are some bumps along the way as God will teach you how to serve so that you can understand how to lead, right? Let me give you a quick overview. Number one, Joseph has this dream and he tells his brothers, he's like, hey guys, y'all are all going to bow down to me. I'm going to be your leader. I mean, this is the runt of the litter. This is the baby. And he's got his chest bowed out and his little coat that he wears. His daddy loves him so much. He's like, by the way, I'm God's pick. And they're like, all right. And so they get together and they say, hey, Joseph's coming. And well, they were planning on killing him. Like game over, killing him. And the Bible said one of the brothers piped up and was like, let's not do that. Let's not go that. So here's what they did. They found a pit and they threw him in it and left him there. They found a hole in the ground, threw him in there, took his coat, ripped it up, soaked it in blood, and brought it back to Dad and said, hey, Dad, by the way, Joseph's dead. He must have got eaten by a lion. And Jacob goes into like this mourning. It's his son. It's his favorite. He's ready to just give everything up. Meanwhile, Joseph's still in the pit, right? So they dig him out like he's buried. He wasn't buried. They pull him out. As this tribe of people are coming by, they sell him to be a slave. So Joseph, who was called to be a leader, is now a slave. He finds himself in the house of a man named Potiphar. He's just a servant there. But the Bible said that Joseph starts, he's taking care of business. He's doing all the things that he should be doing. He's carrying himself well. He is serving well until one day Potiphar's gone and his wife goes, hey, Joseph, come here. He's like, Nope. So finally the story comes out where she rips his jacket off of him and claims that he tried to rape her. Right? Okay, let's keep going. So Joseph now, who's called to be a leader, is falsely accused of this and ends up himself in prison. Better than dead, I guess. So the man who's called to be a leader is now not just a slave, he's now a prisoner. And he stays there for quite some time, stays there for a long time. The Bible said he stayed there long enough that he develops this reputation as a prisoner who's like a good prisoner. He's like on a work release program where he's kind of in charge of things at the prison and he's doing this and he's in charge of people and he's in charge of cleanup and he's in charge of all this stuff. And the Bible said that there were a couple of the king's men who ended up in prison. And so Joseph is just doing what Joseph does. He's learned how to serve with integrity at Potiphar's house when he had the opportunity to sin and he said no. And now he finds himself in the prison learning how to operate and to serve with excellence. And the Bible said that these guys start having these dreams, these visions from God. We're not going to go down the road, but there's a baker and there's a kind of a butler, the cupbearer for the king, and they have these visions. They're like, we don't know what it means. And Joseph said, I do. I've got a history with some dreams. And he starts telling them what it means. And he tells one of them, he's like, you're gonna get released and you're gonna get killed. They're gonna kill you. And he tells the other, tells the cupbearer, you're going to be restored to your position with the king. He said, and by the way, when you get there, let the king know that I'm here and that I've been falsely accused and I've served my sentence and I'm doing everything right. I want to be released on good behavior. Don't forget me when you're there. Well, the Bible said that the cupbearer is, like Joseph interpreted the dream, restored to his position. And some time passes, a long time, and Joseph's still there. Joseph's still in prison. And then finally one day Pharaoh has a dream, and he's like, I don't know what this dream means. I need someone to help me interpret what it means. And the cupbearer goes, you know what? I just remembered that I was in prison with a dude who could interpret this stuff. He had some kind of connection with the spiritual world, and it was weird, but he can tell you what it means. And so Pharaoh says, all right, bring him out. Let's do it. And so exactly what happens. Joseph begins telling Pharaoh exactly what's going to be, exactly what the dream means, and it comes to pass just like he said. And so Joseph now is taken from a prison and made the number 2 man of the country. How's that for a promise from God? But I can promise you something. Whenever God called Joseph to be a leader, as he ended up being, Joseph never saw the pit coming. But if it wasn't for the pit, he'd have never made it to Potiphar's house. And if it wasn't for Potiphar's house and being falsely accused, he'd have never made it to a prison. And if he'd never made it to the prison, guess what? He'd have never made it to the palace. I want to give you 3 quick things as we look into this, as we talk about the journey, kind of a broad look at Joseph's life and draw a few conclusions. And I want you to apply this to your own life as we talk about the journey that we're on. Number 1, don't stop dreaming about the destination. Don't forget you're going somewhere. As we talk about Joseph, I can promise you, when you're at the bottom of a pit, you're not thinking about the palace. When you're being falsely accused of something as a slave, you're not thinking about the palace, right? When you've been in prison for years, you're not thinking about the palace. Here's what I want to tell you. Don't stop dreaming about the destination. Every time, Joseph's promised the palace, but every time he looks around, he's not there. When you're in a situation that doesn't look like your promise, it's easy to, number 1, get distracted, right? As in, you forget everything ahead and you're consumed with the current struggle. Anybody get wrapped up in your current situation and you wake up and that's all that's on your mind and there's no way out and you get completely inundated with the right now? It's easy to get distracted. It's easy to get discouraged. When you know that God's called you to be somewhere and the current state you're in looks nothing like that, can I tell you what? We've been there. It's easy to get discouraged when you know that God's calling you to build something and the thing you're trying to build keeps falling apart. Fact. You get discouraged as in you assume that the current struggle has negated the promises of God. Just made them where they don't even matter anymore. Let me give you some Bible for that. 2 Corinthians 1:20 says this, for all the promises of God in Him are yes, and in Him amen, to the glory of God through us. Romans 11:29 says the gifts and the callings of God are irrevocable. In other words, what you're going through right now doesn't make the promises of God null. They don't void them. It's not like a check that He decided He was going to void out, rip up, and throw in the trash can. Just because the situation you're in right now doesn't match where you've been called to, don't write it off just yet. You're going somewhere. We're on a journey. So it's easy to get distracted. It's easy to get discouraged. And thirdly, it's easy to become defiant. As in, if God doesn't do your way, then you're not going to do it anyway. That if God doesn't do it exactly like I think it should be done, I'm done with Him. I wouldn't speak to anybody who has got control issues this way. But there's no one here like that, so we can say it open and honestly. There are times when God doesn't do it exactly like I think it should be done, and so I just get my hands in it, right? And I'll do it my own way, and I'll do it myself, and God, I don't need your help because I can handle this. Oh, nobody's that stubborn, right? You wouldn't say it, but we'll do it. You would never tell God, leave me alone, I got it. That's a thing in our house. That means, don't worry, I got it. That right there is the thing. And either one of us can do that. And we get the whole message has been sent. It's like when I've been asked to do something repeatedly and somehow it slipped my mind, and then Crystal walks by and goes, hey. But there are times in my walk with God where I look at him and go, you didn't do it when I wanted you to, and you didn't do it how I wanted you to. Guess what? I got it. I'll handle it myself. And those times turn out bad every single time. So it's easy to get distracted. It's easy to get discouraged. It's easy to become defiant. And I'm not saying that you should live in a fantasy world where we avoid everything. And just like my nature as a Welford is to ostrich, where I stick my head in the sand and pretend it doesn't exist. Like, if I ignore it, it goes away, right? That's my nature. I'm not saying that we should live in this fantasy world where we just avoid the current struggles, but I have to learn to process my now through the lens of my promise and not process my promise through the lens of my now. That means I'm processing life through who He is and not how I feel. It means I'm processing life by what the Word of God tells me and not what my emotions tell me. So don't stop dreaming about the destination. Secondly, don't neglect those who are on the journey with you. Listen, I'm not saying it was enjoyable because the majority of his experience with people were negative. Joseph had brothers that didn't like him. He had employers that didn't like him. He had prisoners that didn't like him. I'm not saying that it was always enjoyable. But every single time Joseph moved from one season of life to the next, it was through the people around him. His brothers put him in the pit. His brothers sold him into slavery. Potiphar's wife got him thrown into prison. It was ultimately a prisoner who ended up getting him out. It was the people around him who moved Joseph through the seasons of life. And we cannot afford to ignore the people around us because God is going to use them to move you toward your calling. And sometimes it'll be a really good experience, and guess what? Sometimes it'll be bad experiences. But God is going to use the people in your life to move you toward the calling He has in your life. In every single stage, it was the people around him that God used to move him toward His promise. Here's what I want to tell us as it relates to church, as it relates to community, as it relates to what we do here. You are not alone. And when you're in the pit all by yourself, can I tell you something? You are not there by yourself. You may feel alone, it may look alone, it may sound alone, but I promise you, God has placed people in your life to go through life with you. We believe wholeheartedly here in community, right? That's why we're doing micro churches. That's why we meet up during the week. Sunday's just kind of an extra thing. This isn't where all of our focus is. This isn't like we're not having a light show and production here. Why? Because we believe in the power of community. Don't neglect those who are on the journey with you. Because there will be things that go on in your life that happen, and you'll try to process them outside of the lens of community, and you'll miss what God's doing. I think about there was a time that we were in language school in Costa Rica before we were missionaries in South America, and we had like this gap between semesters. And we had saved up, and we had kind of lived tightly, and I mean, like walked a few miles to the neighborhood, the barrio meat market. You know, we were like coming home walking with 2 pineapples and a chicken. Like come butchered ourselves and we'd get to the house. Like we lived tight. So we had a little bit saved up, and what we wanted to do was experience a little bit of Costa Rica before we left. And so we had this 2 weeks between trimesters, and so we decided we were going down to Manuel Antonio, this like beach town. Is gorgeous, like where the jungle meets the beach. It's fantastic. And so Krista's mom and dad came between trimesters and met us there, and we were all going to go down there and spend a few days down in the canopy of the rainforest, a few miles from the beach. And so we get up that morning, and we're timing it out. We rented a car. We're headed down. We should be there by like mid-afternoon. Well, we get about 45 minutes to an hour before our destination, and we come to like this standstill halt in traffic. And it's Costa Rica. There are things, there's stuff. Is it livestock in the road? I don't know. Somebody turned over something and crashed. Who knows? They drive crazy there. It's like a sport. You drive hard. And so we come to like this standstill stop, and I'm like, well, it'll open up for you. I'm captain of this boat. I'm driving the car, and I've got in-laws here and a little bitty. But how old was Grayson? He was 1. I have a 1-year-old. It's August or July, I don't remember. It's this time of year in Costa Rica. Hot. And I've got this little car, and we're all kind of crammed in there, and it's hot, and we're sweaty, and we're miserable, and we've not moved in a little while. And so finally I get out and start kind of walking down this line because we literally haven't moved. It's not like we're creeping along. We have not moved. And I just kind of start walking toward the abyss there. And finally get up far enough where there's some people congregated. And as a win, I began speaking to these people in their native tongue. I mean, that was a win all in itself. So I started asking these guys, like, what in the world, what's happening? What are we doing? And they said, oh, we have a protest happening ahead. And the fishermen of this village have shut down the bridge. This bridge is the only way through. There's no like side road around it. This is the bridge that gets you from here to there. They have shut down the bridge. I said, okay. I'm American. We don't do that. We don't shut down the bridges because we got places to go, right? Well, that's the mode of expressing yourself there. And so they said, well, they shut down the bridge. I said, well, how long are we going to be here? They said, we don't know. Well, what are we doing? They're protesting the price of fish and the taxes associated with that's their livelihood. So they're sending a signal to the government by shutting down the road. I said, you mean to tell me that I'm steadily running out of gas back there? I've got a 1-year-old in the car who's mad and ill and cutting teeth and everything else. And we don't know when we're going to get to go anywhere? I said, that's exactly right. And at that point, we stayed in a delay for 4 or 5 hours, just sitting there. And can I tell you something? That delay that I was in, that I experienced that day, had nothing to do with me. That delay that I experienced that day had everything to do with a fisherman and the price of fish. And it had absolutely nothing to do with me, but I was there caught in the middle. Can I tell you something? As we go through life as a community, sometimes you'll experience delays and they don't have anything to do with you. But if you can't process the fact that you're not the only one here, you'll miss it completely. Because sometimes delays are about the price of fish and not about you. There was nothing, it was not the devil attacking me, trying to keep me from vacation. It was not a spiritual warfare that I've just got to pray through and I'm going to bind together and we're going to defeat. No, it was the price of fish. It was about a fish taco. It was not about me. So here's what I want to tell you. You cannot neglect the people around you in your life. Why? Because sometimes you'll experience things that have nothing to do with you, but it has everything to do with them. And you need to be aware that the people who God has placed in your life are going through things also. Don't neglect those that are on the journey with you. And then finally, don't be afraid to take the next step. Joseph didn't get it all right. As a matter of fact, he'd learned to keep his mouth shut early on. He'd have been a whole lot better off. But something in his life allowed him to show up as a prisoner and serve with integrity. Something in him allowed him to show up in a prison and serve with excellence and operate in the giftings and the callings that God had given him. Don't be afraid to take the next step. Psalm 19, 105 says this. It says, your word, is a lamp to my feet and a light to my path. Here's what I want sometimes. All the time. I want the Waze version of God's plan. Does anybody ever use Waze? Waze is fantastic. Because Waze will tell you when there's a bumper that's fallen off someone's car in the middle of the road. Waze will tell you, you close your ears back there, that there are highway patrolmen 1 mile ahead. God bless the person who took the time and to mark that on the map. I love Waze because it gives you the quickest route. It gives you the most efficient route. It'll give you the shortest route. But if there's a bridge shut down, it'll get you around it, right? I want the Waze version of what God has for my life. Like I want the destination, and I want to know if there's any difficulties in my path. I want to know if there are any speed traps in my path. I want to know if there's any detours that I'm going to have to take. I want the whole thing. But here's why God doesn't give it to me. Because if He gave me the destination and all the details therein, I would never talk to Him again. I'll do it all by myself, right? I got it. Because I've got the checklist and I've got the destination and I've got the journey. I know what's going on because I've got the Waze version of what's going on. Well, if you look in Psalm 119 here, we don't even know who the author is, but it's apparent that he had a relationship with God because he said, here's what I've learned about him. He said, I've learned that God will give you a light to your feet and a light on your path. And He may not give you the entire instruction book, but He'll tell you what the next step is. He'll let you know what to do for the next. See, some of us want 10 steps down the road, and we're not even listening for the next one. And we stay in this sense of like panic because I don't know the entire journey. I'm not going to take one step. But the fact is, as I'm on a journey, God will direct my next step. And the only way you'll make it to the promise is by following the person of Jesus Christ. Can I tell you something? You must be more committed to the person than you are the destination or the process. You've got to be more committed to Jesus than you are your purpose. More committed to Jesus than you are my calling. I've been in the season of life where I just treated God like a sermon vending machine, where I put my 10 minutes in and He spit out a message. And I could preach it on Sunday. But I will find myself, if I get into that situation, that I am lost and I just kind of come unraveled because when I become more committed to the process than to the person of Jesus Christ, I lose my sense of what the next step is. If you're on a journey with Jesus, I'm going to repeat something I said earlier. It will take you longer to get where you're going than you think, and it will take you a route you probably didn't see coming. And you may get delayed for fish tacos. And you may end up in the pit or in the prison. But can I tell you something? None of that negates the promises of God. You know, when you're driving along, I probably shouldn't even preach this after yesterday because we spent all day driving yesterday. And all these folks who from all over need to go home. That's terribly sour and bitter of me. But I was passing, like we'd pass an Ohio tag and I'd be like, go home. Pass all of the Texas tags. Go home. You have your own beaches. They're ugly, but go home. Like I was ready for everybody to go back. Just go home. The interstate was full. Florida's full. Y'all go home. But when you're driving, you see the big orange signs and it's like detour ahead, delays ahead. When you're driving, you assume those aren't even optional. You know, like it says, you have to exit now because we're going to take you on a detour because there's construction in. We don't even question it. We just do it. It's not an option. I just take the detour. Whenever I'm on the interstate and everything comes to a screeching halt. Caleb knows what I'm talking about. Trying to get here from Meridian this week. When everything comes to a, it's not even optional. I don't go in the ditch. I don't try to take the median. I just sit there because it's not optional. I'm just like, okay, I got to do it. What if I gave Jesus the right to interrupt my life and it wasn't even optional? Because some of us have when Jesus speaks, give me a minute attitude. But what would our life look like if it didn't even have an option? If we assumed there was no option? If I had a yes, Lord attitude instead of a give me a minute attitude? I'll get to it when I want to attitude. If I had a, okay, God, I hear you, and I'm going to take the next step because it's not even an option. What would my life look like if my relationship with Jesus didn't even look like an option? But I just did it. That's being a disciple. At the end of my life, I don't want to look around and realize I've been a believer and not been a follower. When it's all said and done, I want to know that when He spoke to me, I took the next step. I did what He called me to do. And as we went through the detours and through the delays, I want to know that I did it right. Tyler, come help me. We're about to bring this thing to a close. Question for you this morning. Do you have a, yes, Lord, relationship with Him? Or give me a few minutes, I'll get to it. Kind of a relationship with Jesus. And I'm telling you, that will change everything about your life. When you become more committed to the person of Jesus than the process or the promise or the calling or the stuff or the job or this or that, when you become more committed to the person, it allows me to walk through life confidently, knowing that I can take the next step and not fear what's ahead. It sounds like that psalmist in Psalm 23, right? Whenever he said, "The Lord's my shepherd, I shall not want." What are you going to need? I don't know, but I'm not going to lack, right? He leads me. When I need food, it's there. When I need shelter, it's there. Whenever I need a cool drink of water, it's there, because He guides me. That's a real loose paraphrase of Psalm 23, by the way. That's not. You can catch that one later. But the idea is that when I'm following Him, it relieves me of a lot of worry and a lot of anxiety, because some of you spend a whole lot of effort worrying about the unknown, when you need to realize, when you become committed to the person of Jesus, you may only get the next step, but you can take the next step with confidence. That's why David said, He has lifted me up out of the pit, set my feet on a rock, brought me up out of the miry clay, put my feet on solid ground. He said, now I don't have to worry about a lot of stuff, because I'm following the person and not some kind of plan or process or calling or feeling. I'm following the person of Jesus. In closing today, I want to invite somebody to make a commitment to Jesus, that you are ready to take, not to figure it all out, not to have all the answers, to take the one next step in your life. And some of you say, well, I don't really know what the next step is. That's why we have microchurches. That's why I'm here. That's why Chris is here. That's why we have leaders here. We're going to help each other process what the next step is. But as we spend some time, we're about to spend a few moments in worship as we close this morning. I would challenge you to take a moment as we're just kind of spending some time in the presence of Jesus, worshiping Him. Take a few moments and draw close to Him. And maybe pray something like, Jesus, I'm ready to take the next step. And what that looks like for every single one is a little bit different. So I'm not going to go through all the scenarios. But Jesus, I'm ready to take the next step. Your word is a lamp to my feet, a light to my path. And I'm not worried about all the unknown. But God, I'm ready to take one more next step, because I'm more committed to you than I am to a calling or a promise or a process. I'm following you. I want to be a follower and not just a believer. Would you stand with us all over? Tyler's about to lead us out.